The pounding on my gate at dawn sounded like someone was trying to break in with a sledgehammer. And before I even knew what I was doing, I was outside, boots half-laced, heart still somewhere between sleep and a bad dream, wondering if maybe a cow had gotten loose or a FedEx guy was lost or, maybe the world had just decided to end right there in my driveway. But the moment I swung open that door, every idea I had about what weird meant in this neighborhood changed forever. There they were, 4 HOA guards, huddled around an actual campfire right in front of my gate, looking like they'd set up a military outpost overnight, and as soon as they saw me, they popped up like they'd rehearsed it, standing shoulder to shoulder like they were about to issue an ultimatum to a hostile nation. Their leader, clipboard under one arm and flashlight shining directly in my face, told me, with the kind of fake serious tone only HOA wannabes can muster, "You are not allowed to leave your own property until you apologize to Karen." Yeah, that happened. Half asleep, staring at a bunch of grown men who'd camped in my front yard, fully equipped with radios, clipboards, foggy thermoses, and more self-importance than sense, I honestly wondered if I'd slipped into an alternate universe where HOA drama was an Olympic sport and Karen was up for the gold. I just stood there, blinking, shivering, shoes untied, thinking, is this real life? And the more I looked at them, the more I realized they looked miserable. Eyes red, coffee gone cold, probably regretting ever signing up for this little siege, but now too deep to back out. I told them to clear off, but the leader puffed up, announced this was a peacekeeping blockade, and declared they weren't moving until I acknowledged my wrongful behavior toward Mrs. Karen at the last HOA meeting. And I almost lost it, because my crime was showing everyone a video of Karen sneaking onto my land in the middle of the night, measuring my fence with a tape measure about 3 feet longer than her common sense. Apparently, exposing the HOA, Queen gets you an armed camp out at your own gate. They gave me 1 hour to apologize, or else. I asked, or else what? And another guy tried to look intimidating with his flashlight under his chin, but honestly, he just looked like a kid telling ghost stories at summer camp. "We have authorization to issue escalating consequences," he warned, like he was quoting from a bad superhero movie. I told him the only thing escalating was my impatience. And as I tried to open my gate, one of them actually grabbed it palm flat, like he was bracing for a tornado. "Sir, do not force us to take disciplinary action." Everything got so quiet you could hear the wind pause. Even the birds stopped to see if I'd lose my mind. That's when I realized they were, in the dumbest way possible, absolutely serious. One even put down his marshmallow skewer and squared up, and I knew, right then, talking to them was a waste of oxygen. So I just turned around, walked back in my house, and called the sheriff because I wasn't about to negotiate with pajama-clad commandos enforcing human rights violations over a missed apology. And while I waited, I peeked out the window and watched them strategizing, drawing invisible maps in the dirt, rotating guard shifts, and putting a guy on driveway watch in a folding lawn chair like he was guarding Fort Knox. Then the sheriff arrived, and here's where things took a real twist. Because instead of dealing with the wannabe patrol first, he walked straight up to me, lowered his voice, and said, "You won't believe this, but the HOA called us first, said you were threatening their peacekeeping team." I nearly bit my tongue in half. "How do you threaten people who've camped on your property uninvited?" He sighed, then told me Karen had already filed a formal complaint at 5 a.m., claiming I was hostile, aggressive, possibly dangerous, and had asked for extra protection. I said the only danger out here was the collective IQ, but he just gave me that, yeah, I know look every lawman gets when he's stuck in the HOA twilight zone. He finally walked over to the guards, who actually saluted him. Saluted, like he was their general. He looked at them like, "Please tell me this is a prank," but nope. They argued that Karen was emotionally wounded and needed justice, and they'd hold the siege until I apologized. Watching the sheriff rub his forehead, like he was questioning every life choice, I realized this was about to spiral way out of control. The guards wouldn't leave. Karen was escalating through official channels, and neighbors were already emerging, mugs in hand, enjoying the drama like it was Saturday morning TV. The sheriff said he needed to walk the property and check for trespassers. Finally, a little peace, but a minute later, he was yelling my name from the backfield. I ran over, and he pointed to fresh boot prints circling my barn, up to my workshop window, and back toward the gate. They hadn't just camped. They'd wandered all over my land in the dark. That changed the whole game. Trespassing, illegal entry, harassment, and the sheriff was ready to end it right there when the guards pointed behind him, saying, "Sir, our reinforcements have arrived." That's when the real circus started. Down the road came a caravan of white HOA golf carts, hazard lights flashing, Karen standing at the front in sunglasses, arms crossed, smiling like a Bond villain. She stepped off with the confidence of a queen, strode up to the sheriff, and announced that my behavior had escalated to unacceptable levels. The HOA Security Council had voted to initiate corrective action, and she demanded a public apology for her humiliation at the last meeting. The sheriff just blinked, because honestly, it sounded like she was quoting from soap opera in a language only she spoke. Karen kept going, explaining their plan: a public apology, a fine, temporary gate suspension, and an inspection of my workshop to make sure I wasn't harboring dangerous equipment. Which, yeah, the only thing I had that could hurt anyone was my tractor, and it had already crushed one of her flower pots after she parked it in the middle of my driveway. Meanwhile, neighbors gathered, whispering, filming, sipping tea, watching Karen like she was putting on a parade. The sheriff finally shut her down, telling her to move the guards and leave my property. Karen argued that the bylaws granted her emergency powers. Her guards looked confused. They'd never heard of such a thing. Turns out, Karen had written the amendment herself, dropped it in the suggestion box, which she admitted had been misplaced and never actually voted on, but her intent was enough to enforce it temporarily. The crowd lost it, laughing until she glared them into silence. The sheriff again ordered them out. Karen refused, calling it a sign of weakness if she backed down. He called for backup, and Karen, not missing a beat, tried to guilt the crowd, criticizing my driveway, workshop color, even my mailbox for bad feng shui. When she said it had negative spiritual energy, people actually snorted out loud. Karen tried to climb on her golf cart for a dramatic speech, tripped over her sandal, and the sheriff nearly choked laughing. That's when I finally stepped up, told her no apology was coming, and Karen, eyes flashing, snapped her fingers for a guard to hand her a sealed envelope. She handed it to me, dead serious. "This is your final notice." Inside was a printed ticket for a mandatory apology session at noon, hosted by her, complete with a badly photoshopped image of her wearing a tiara. I asked if it was a joke. She said no. Failure to attend would mean escalated consequences. The sheriff stepped in, warning her to leave or face trespassing and harassment charges. Karen glared, declared retreat but not surrender, and the whole crew rolled away in their golf carts. But the madness wasn't over. As I went to my gate, I found a tiny, blinking recorder buried in the gravel, a listening device. Karen's crew had planted surveillance gear on my property overnight. I called Marcus, my neighbor, who'd watched the entire circus unfold. And when I showed him the recorder, he said, "Only desperate people bug ranch gates like they've seen too many spy movies." We started searching, found more devices, taped to the water trough, under rocks, behind beams, each labeled property of HOA Security Council. It got real fast. I tried the sheriff again. He was dealing with Karen's retreat clogging up county roads. So Marcus and I went to confront Karen at her place. There she was, running an emergency HOA meeting, waving a stack of papers, invoking Article 47 of some community protection initiative she'd made up 5 minutes before. When I accused her of planting surveillance, she faked a faint, claimed it was all part of a wildlife monitoring project, then switched stories, said it was an air quality study, spinning excuses while her followers nodded like hypnotized pigeons. That's when Karen pulled the ultimate move, revealed a garage full of maps, strings, photos, and sticky notes. A full-on conspiracy board with my face in the center. She called it a risk assessment. The crowd gasped. Even her guards looked rattled. Just then, the sheriff's radio crackled. The main road was blocked with golf carts, cones, and Karen's crew, declaring it a restricted zone. Karen smirked, standing tall as her kingdom expanded. The sheriff warned her, but she just smiled and said the road was HOA regulated, not public. He muttered, headed to the blockade. Karen clapped her hands, called for Phase 2, rolled out a portable stage, banner, and microphone, announcing a public apology event at noon. Her guards fumbled with extension cords, almost knocked over the stage. Neighbors gathered, half worried, half entertained. Karen declared me under temporary observation, designated a tent as an offender holding area, and claimed she could lock down the entire neighborhood for community correction protocol. An old board member, Mrs. Delgado, called her out. There's no such thing as emergency lockdown. Karen snapped back, inventing fake workshops. The more people saw, the more her authority unraveled. She tried to rally support with a binder full of evidence, photos of me mowing my lawn, my dog barking, me walking to my mailbox, all labeled as violations. Even her guards looked embarrassed. But then sirens. The sheriff broke through the barricade, furious, dust on his uniform, hat crooked, patience shredded. He called Karen out, listed her crimes, and when she tried to argue, told her if she didn't apologize to the whole neighborhood, she'd be detained for interference, trespassing, and more. The crowd erupted. Finally, someone said it. Mrs. Delgado led the call for Karen's removal. The board moved to vote. Karen tried one last time, waving a secret envelope, but a gust of wind scattered her evidence across the park. As she chased the pages, everyone laughed, her reign collapsing in public. The sheriff called an emergency vote. Karen, trembling, whispered to me as I passed, Phase 4 will fix everything. And I'll admit, her eyes made my blood run cold. The board convened. Lights flickered, power cut out. An emergency siren blasted, and in the darkness, Karen returned with a new convoy. Golf carts in formation, banners waving, guards in thrift store uniforms. She declared the board compromised, herself still in command, Phase 4 activated, and claimed authority even over the sheriff. It was a civil war on golf carts, all battery power and delusion. Just as things got dangerous, Mr. Thompson, quietest board member alive, held up the removal document. Karen was officially out. She screamed, denied the vote, but this time, no one listened. Her guards hesitated. Karen hissed, climbed back into her cart, and vanished into the night, her convoy following. But I knew, as the sheriff and deputies searched my property and found chains, locks, more fake fines and notices, Phase 4 wasn't her endgame. She'd left behind traps, chaos, and a promise of worse to come. That night, Marcus and I barely slept, every sound in the dark making us jump, and just past midnight, a thud at my barn, a fake fine in a plastic dome, left by hand. She'd come back unseen. Mrs. Delgado woke us up. The board had found Karen's true Phase 4 plan, a wall covered in maps, policies, a timeline labeled Phase 4 implementation, forged letters, even a USB drive with doctored evidence. Karen's plan had been in motion for months, and if the sheriff hadn't stopped her, she'd have unleashed investigations, framed jobs, maybe even arrests. As dawn broke, a deputy arrived with a new envelope. Karen had taped it to my gate, a letter calmly announcing Phase 5 was already in motion, that I'd enjoyed my last quiet morning. Seconds later, a boom echoed. The HOA office was on fire. Karen was erasing the past, covering her tracks, burning every file that could stop her. And as the sun rose, it was painfully clear her endgame had started. Now the only question left is, what would you do if your neighbor's war never ended? Would you fight, flee, or try to forgive? Tell me in the comments, because justice in a neighborhood like mine, well, sometimes it's just the beginning.